Welcome back to the channel, folks, and to a video that I hope is going to help you get some really nice looking gun teams for the tabletop. I'll be sharing a few straightforward and practical ideas for how you can approach getting your gun teams assembled, painted and being practical on the tabletop too. There will be the usual slideshow at the end, a big photo dump for you to look at completed examples, but without any further delay, let's get over and look at these ideas. Handling the gun kits when you're painting them can be quite tricky because there's no obvious place to hold on to. So we want to get them mounted up in some way. Now you can take a similar approach to this with the metal kits where you would use bits of sprue and super glue. But what I'm doing here is I am cutting out an appropriately sized piece of the sprue. With the Pak 40 we've got a really good fit here with the central section, as you can see, and I'm going to glue that on to the underside of the gun where it can be removed without causing any visual damage. You don't want to use too much glue here, folks, it just has to tack into place, and as you can see you can hold that and get your fingers into it in all different kind of angles, airbrush it, paint it from all directions so that all the cover is done. Now you can also do something similar here with different guns such as the Nebs, and you can see it's a lot simpler. It's just a little bit of sprue with a flat area on that sprue. Snip that out, stick the neb on, let it dry, put it on a base so you can handle it, and there you go. Let's look at some important points you'd want to consider, some options that you have when you're mounting the guns to the bases. Let's have a look at this Pak 43. I've already added the crew, I've added the cruciform mount, and now I'm going to mount the gun. Now I'm showing this because it's important to make sure, however you do this, that there's enough space to mount the full gun, including breech mechanism and such likes, so that they don't clash, hit or end up askew at the wrong angle because of where the crew are placed on the base. So a little bit of planning is required as you're working your way through this. I'm going to use this same product here that I covered the base with to attach the guns, and as you can see here, the completed ammo crates. It doesn't take a lot, as you can see, to get a nice firm bind to the base, and that will sit and dry and attach itself completely to the surface it's sitting on. And we're going to take the same approach to the guns. You can see I'm just putting small amounts on the wheels and on the spades at the ends of the trails there, and that'll be enough just to set it down onto the dry surface. I don't put it onto a wet surface, remember, folks. Then it's getting it into the right position. As you can see, it's now nicely centred in front of the crew. And then we're going to just add a little bit more of the basing material beside the wheels, beside the spades, and then we're going to level it out a bit so that it's not just big lumps sitting there, but it's going to be sat securely into a nice layer of the base material, which itself is going to grip firmly to the dry basing material. You'll notice that I'm ensuring the wheels and the spades stay firmly in place during this whole process, because remember, this paste dries overnight. It's not like a super glue or such likes. There are two reasons why I prefer this paste to attach the guns to the base rather than super glue. Firstly, these guns are lightweight, and this, once it's dry, is a very flexible bond, unlike super glue, which can dry to a very brittle quality and can result in pieces sort of popping off the base. It's not going to happen with this. Secondly, it's a great way of joining the gun to the base in terms of the setting. You know, it's going to have earth on the gun that can be seen on the base, which you might expect to see. You know, the gun spades getting dug into the soil, the guns making ruts in the soil, so it will also look good as well as hold good. When you're done, set them aside overnight. When they're dry, you can then finish off the base, be it painting it, weathering it, or just adding some ground cover to it. As you'll be aware, the crew on their bases fit into slots on the larger plastic base. Now this might not always suit the look that you want, especially if you're going to do terrain on the base. You know, they may be too far apart, or depending on the design of the gun, the trails might get in the way. You can see here, for instance, the trails are much narrower on the 6-pounder, and I wanted the crew all behind the gun shield. So you're not going to be able to achieve that just by following these slots that are set there on the base for you. But there's quite a simple solution to get the grouping that you can see there on the 6-pounder. I'm going to use a sharp knife here, folks, so we need to be careful when we're doing this, especially with these new thermoplastic figures. They're a bit harder to work with than the soft plastic, but with the figure well braced and cutting away from me, I am just going to saw through the foot or the knee of the figure, now where it's joined to the base, and I'm going to be careful that I'm not cutting into the boot or into the knee, and that I am cutting into the base. It's a lot easier to trim off a little bit of extra material left on the shoe, on the foot, rather than trying to compensate for half a boot being cut off at the sole. And there's another option here, folks. If you want to leave part of the base on to help the attaching process, perhaps putting it into an area within the round recess, you can just snip off the unwanted base, and that allows you to pivot the figure in place, so you'll need to use some filler to fill in the rest of the recess that doesn't have that part of the base in it. But for this example here, I'm going to just cut the figure completely off the tab. There you can see that's quite a nice neat cut that can be easily glued onto the base after just a little bit of trimming to get rid of any excess. Now we're not going to throw the little tab away, folks, that we've cut off, because remember, we still have the recesses to deal with on the bases. So you can see we're now free to put the crew down wherever we want, depending on the shape and position of the gun. But remember these little tabs, folks, glue them into the recess, pare it down carefully with a knife, and you're going to have a completely filled in and smooth surface to mount the crew and the guns on. Now let's have a look at some ideas for identifying command bases within our gun teams. Now if you're working straight out of the box here with these plastic kits, what I do is leave ammo crates, ammo boxes on the command base. For instance, if there are one ammo box with every gun, I just stack them all together. And what you can see here is I glue my ammo boxes and then mount them onto my small bases that I paint my figures on. And that makes it a lot easier than trying to paint them all individually, and it means you can put the completed pile of boxes straight onto whatever base you're going to choose as your command base, and therefore it's clear to you and clear to who you're playing against what one is the command base. For this Nebelwerfer here, you can see I've used some green stuff to create a tarpaulin that I've laid the rocket cases and the stack of rockets out onto. That's a nice touch you can do too. There are often extra crew on the sprue that are not required for the full complement of your platoon. If that's the case, you can add one of these to the base, and that's a nice easy identifier for it being the command base too. Especially on medium bases like this, you have to consider where the extra crew member is going to go and how you're going to fit them in there, because there might not be a slot or a hole in the place that is most appropriate. But I'm going to discuss how you can handle that a little later on in the video too. Also, If, like myself, you played in version 3 or earlier, you might have a lot of redundant teams, which are perfect for this. You could have command teams, observer teams, possibly even staff teams that you don't want anymore and they're just gathering dust in your figure trays. I find myself reusing these redundant figures. You can see there's a couple of figures here on this heavy mortar, which used to be command figures for, I think it was a regimental gun platoon. So take them off there and stick them onto a gun base and you've got a very obvious command. Here I've used a staff team. I had a Hungarian artillery blister just sitting there doing nothing. I'm not going to use those staff figures for anything else. So here we've got a lovely looking base. They've even got a little table, maybe a bit too busy, but it's definitely a command base. And then next I've got another Hungarian base here. This is an anti-tank gun which has got observer figures on it. One with binoculars that looks great, another one lying down with the radio. It fits in quite nicely. Once again, it'll be nice and clear who the command base is for this platoon. This approach may appall the collector in you if you want to keep that classic element, so to speak, in your collection, and I certainly don't recommend doing this with figures from a classic box set, for instance, the gun sets that come with the sculpted bases, but it's still definitely an option if you want to go down that route for command teams. And that's us done, folks. Hope you found it useful and interesting. So, as always, thanks for watching, and as always, thanks to the subscribers out there and to you folks who just drop in from time to time to see what's happening on the channel. Now, before we finish off with a nice photo dump, a nice slideshow for you, if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by hitting the subscribe button and hitting the bell button, which means we'll definitely see you all on the next one.